On today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast, we've got practice day 2 at the NovaCare Complex Eagles training camp takeaways, plus Brandon Graham, Lane Johnson, Jason Kelce, and Fletcher Cox. They've been together for over a decade. Who could be the next group of young Eagles that play together for a decade or more? Some Jersey talk, all of that coming up on this Friday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Welcome, Eagles fans, to a Friday edition of the show, as always part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Louis DiBiase, joined as always by Gino Camilleri. We got some practice takeaways for you guys. The Eagles were on the practice field at the NovaCare Complex today, open to the media. But Gino, before we get into that, Brandon Graham talked to the media today, Jason Kelce, Lane Johnson, and Fletcher Cox, like the big four, the staple of... I have personally really not known of Eagles football without, especially Brandon Graham. In 2010, he was drafted, and I'm a 12-year-old kid. Did I watch the Eagles before that? Sure, but that was like the first year I really got into it and became like a passionate football fan. So for me, that's all I've known. And, you know, kind of thinking about them and how long they've been together, 11 years as teammates, started to wonder about a lot of these young players on the Eagles. And if you had to create a new group of four, and there's a lot of options, which is a good sign because that has not been the case for the Eagles most years. They have not had young talent over the last 5 to 7 years, I'd say, that have this kind of potential. But if you had to pick another group of four that could play together that long, which is rare, but if it happened, who would be that group of four?
And I think you could go back to the early 2000s as well and throw some of those guys in there.
Yes.
I mean, Donovan and Brian played late into the 2000s together, but there was never those four guys that were really pillars of your team, right? You talk about what BG, Fletch, Lane, and Jason have all meant to this team. Yeah. And I think more than anything, Lou, it's evident that the trenches are this team, right? So if we're going to start right there,
that's a great point.
I think you have to go Landon Dickerson, in my opinion.
Okay.
Toss Jordan Mailata on that list. Mm-hmm. Josh Sweat right now, him and Jordan have been together for quite some time. Who says he's going anywhere?
Nobody on Twitter mentioned Sweat. I like that you brought up Josh.
He's already been with the guys for a couple of years, so you have to toss that into the equation. And I think you go with one of the Georgia kids as one of the other anchors there. Yeah. You might get
which one would you
five?
Pick?
You might get 5 if it all works out, but that, I mean, obviously it's the NFL. But I would say,
like between the two, Smith or Carter. Yeah. If you had to say someone plays 10 plus years in Philadelphia, who
I think Nolan Smith, because how much cheaper those players become once they get over that second, third contract, right? You look at Brandon Graham, he's not commanding that type of money you would expect out of a bigger interior defensive lineman even. And look at Javon Hargrave versus Jalen Carter. If they were to pay one of those guys, I think you are going to pay the pass rusher, but that's a problem to worry about in 5 years from now, and hopefully they can pay them all. But at the end of the day, it starts with the trenches. That's where this team starts. It runs through there. So you have to find not just guys that are going to make an impact right away, Lou, but people that are going to send that message of what you are foundationally as a team. And what kind of got lost after the passing, I think, of Jim Johnson in the 2000s was that identity, right? Like, what is the identity of this team moving forward? Because for so long...
Well, Sean Desai talked about it yesterday, man. He wants the Eagles defense to be like the city.
Be physical.
He wants physical, hitting, like tackling, making plays, like being a fearful defense, which last year was the first time I felt like since, I don't know, even like 2017, I guess you could say, but last year just felt like a defense teams were actually scared of. And I think the pass rush is the main reason. But yeah, I think since Jim Johnson, you're right, there have not been a lot of defenses. It's probably been like one or two that you can say that about in Philly.
And I think the defense, more than anything, is what it runs through. Like the offensive outburst that we have seen is something new, right? Even with Donovan, you didn't start to get those crazy outputs on offense outside of the Terrell Owens year, right? And
no,
a lot
it was
of
really
it came
like
through
once Vic and D-Jax and them came in.
Yeah, and it came through the run game of the collection of great backs that they had for the longest time. And I look at this team right now, Lou, and it reminisces so similarly to a lot of those early 2000s teams. And with the Kelly Green coming back to the Buddy Ryan teams where you just have 1, 2, 3, 10 guys that you could send at an offense, and that's going to make their life hell. And that's what you have to have in Sean Desai, the understanding that these guys foundationally can be great for me. And I think that's what Jeff Stoutland has done a great job with in his position group, is that these guys know that they lead, right? The old adage, offensive linemen lead. On defense, you got to know the same thing. Look at Fletcher Cox. Look at BG. Those guys set the tone. Those guys are the thermostat.
There's a reason they get prioritized over other veterans at other positions to be kept, And it's not just because of their leadership, but it's the position they play. So I agree with you. I don't think it's a coincidence the big four that have lasted 11 years together are 2 offensive linemen and 2 defensive linemen. I would say I'm with you on Nolan Smith. It's the personality. It's the speed off the edge. I feel like he's somebody that can age well. Edge rushers, I also think last longer than interior defensive linemen when it comes to their effectiveness. So I think that's a reason I would put Nolan Smith in there. I'm totally with you on Jordan Mailata. Landon Dickerson, I hope. For some reason, the injuries, the injury history, I'm scared that he might not age as well. So far, he's been able to stay healthy, so that's just more pure speculation.
That's
but
fair.
I would say, of course, you got to throw Jalen Hurts in there, quarterback. And then although it's tough because even the best of the best at wide receiver have not lasted with one team for like a decade plus. I mean, you could talk about Antonio Brown, Julio Jones, even Devontae Adams, the list goes on. Much of these guys end up moving on for some reason or another, but there's something about DeVonta Smith. I feel like he's going to be in Philly for a very long time, even over A.J. Brown. I just think he's the type of receiver that ages so well where even when he's 33, 34, you're like, we still want this guy in Philadelphia. So I'm actually going to throw DeVonta Smith in there. I think even though it's a position that's less likely to have Howie Roseman just keep him coming back like a lineman would be, i.e. Jason Peters. He always wants to bring these guys back. I would say DeVonta. I'm going to put DeVonta on the list.
Him in Dallas, I could see Dallas taking on that Zach Ertz role, who obviously wasn't here for a decade.
For sure, Gino. It's a lot tougher to project that with weapons, but I don't know. Yeah, with Smith, I'm going to throw him in there.
I didn't even think about Jalen. Obviously.
Well, yeah. If you can, I guess the good thing is Hurts is at quarterback, and you can say that, and that has not been the case in a long time.
Yeah, the best teams are player-led, and when it doesn't have to be just the quarterback sending the message, when the same message is spread across all of these guys, right? And I keep going back to that unscripted video they put out. If you look at the line of the guys that were standing up talking before the Super Bowl, it's not just Jason Kelce Lane. It's the Darius Slays. It's the A.J. Browns. It's the guys that are maybe a younger veteran type. Look at AJ. He's only 25, 26 years old, and he has to treat this thing like he is a 10-year vet and lead the way for this team. And that above everything, Lou, is going to take them so far that we are able to have this conversation, right? And I think especially recently, too, with the influx of talent, because you're saying I can visualize a role for DeVonta Smith on this team when he's 31 years old. And I could see Jordan Davis playing a huge role for the Eagles team, much like Fletcher
I didn't
Cox.
mention some
Nakobe Dean too.
Yeah, some fans were mentioning Nakobe Dean on Twitter. What if Cam Jurgens ends up being the long-term replacement at center for
Tyler
Jason Kelce?
Steen, you might already found another one too.
Yeah,
I think you're on the right path, Lou.
options.
You're on the right path, and that's what kind of made the Eagles lose their way in that Chip Kelly, those post Andy Reid years, was Deshaun, Macklin, Shady, Vic. Those guys were the foundation setters at the time, and you just took the foundation and threw the baby out with the bathwater, right? But this time around, Nick Sirianni, as corny as he sounds saying it, the connections truly are everything, man. That's what football boils down to. Think of every workplace that you've ever been in. You probably don't like somebody, but in football, it don't matter if you don't like somebody. You got to suck it up and go out there. And I think that's why Lane, Jason, Fletch, and BG, I'm sure those guys have clashed heads at the end of the day, but they know they are professionals. They seem like
best friends to me, man.
You don't know in 13 years. I'm sure something has popped up along the way, but now they know what they are to this team in this city above everything else.
And they've gone through literally everything you could think of together. So when
Mm-hmm.
you kind of have that bond and you've been through the highest of the highs, the lowest of the lows, even the most average of the average, they've been through every single
Mm-hmm.
stage of the NFL life. So yeah, it's huge. And the exciting thing is, as we're talking about, the Eagles have a lot of different players that could end up being, it could be more than 4, Gino. I mean, you mentioned you wanted to put 5 in there. You didn't even say Jalen Hurts, and then I didn't think of Cam Jurgens or Jordan Davis. So, yeah, there's a lot of options, and that's really exciting. And a lot of those guys shined at practice today. We'll get into some practice takeaways coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. And, guys, today's show is sponsored by eBay Motors. Our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Football host Vinny Lyer to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week all season long. Whether you're prepping for a draft or scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide you players that are guaranteed to fit on your roster. So with draft prep underway for the upcoming season, let's see who Vinny has picked out for us in this week's eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. And we're talking quarterback today. I mean, we're going to wait a little bit. This guy, I would say, probably will finish in the top 5 because of his rushing, but I don't know, right now you could probably get him in rounds 3 through 5, and it's Chicago Bears quarterback Justin Fields. So, Gino, I think Lamar Jackson's going to end up going ahead of him, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, some of the bigger names. But when you look at how productive Fields was on the ground last year, and now you throw in DJ Moore, a healthy Darnell Mooney, maybe Chase Claypool takes a step, an improved offensive line, Justin Fields gives me Jalen Hurts 2022 vibes. I don't know if he's going to be in the MVP conversation, but for fantasy football, his rushing, I think, is going to stay close. Maybe it dips a little bit, but the passing, I think, is going to surge. So I think Justin Fields is really good value in the middle rounds of your draft.
If you don't want to spend a pick on Jalen Hurts higher than you're going to have to, because
I
right
didn't
now
even mention Hurts. He's going to go higher for sure. First,
he's a top pick. And if you want to get that bargain bin and get Jalen Hurts a year before he turns into the Jalen Hurts that
at a round or 2 later value,
maybe even 3 or 4. Who knows with the landscape of fantasy football? Justin Fields is that guy. Why? Athleticism. Look at the top dogs, the Josh Allens, the Jalen Hurts, the Lamars. Justin Fields, Lou, I think you're spot on saying he could potentially be a top 5 scorer at the quarterback position, and you might get him in the 6th or 7th round.
It's great value. Vinny Lyer from Locked On Fantasy Football is going to help you win your fantasy championship this year. And eBay Motors knows a championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. Same with your vehicle. With eBay Guaranteed Fit and over 122 million parts and accessories for your vehicle right at your fingertips, you can make sure your ride, stays running smoothly. Air filters, brakes, batteries, taillights, alternators, shock struts, you name it. eBay Motors has it all, and they make sure it's at the right fit for your car because eBay Guaranteed Fit helps you understand exactly what part you need for your vehicles the first time around. So go forth, switch gears, crank the AC up, and say goodbye to sweating if your ride needs a little fixing up, because now you know you'll always be set up for success from the get-go with eBay Guaranteed Fit. Everything your vehicle is calling for is just a click away. For the parts and accessories that fit your vehicle, just look for the green check. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices at ebaymotors.com. eBay Motors, let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. All right, Eagles fans, thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Shout out to our everydayers Monday through Friday for making us a part of your day and your week. Today, the Eagles hit the practice field the second time this week, training camp kicking off where it was open to the media. So we got some takeaways, Gino, and we've been talking about them a lot over the last few days because they're getting hyped. We were talking about in segment 1 who could last a decade plus together, like Lane Johnson, Jason Kelce, Fletcher Cox, and Brandon Graham have. But we got to talk about them more. I mean, at practice today, it sounded like all the new additions stole the show. Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, sounded like DeAndre Swift was making plays in the open field, Olamide Zaccheaus. I don't know if Howie Roseman nailed every move like he did last offseason, but it sounds as promising, and that wasn't the case when you look at 2018 to 2020. Didn't really feel like there was that hype with a lot of the new additions. This year, it feels like last year all over again.
And maybe out of necessity, maybe that's what you see, and it's the closest thing to what you had last year, and you're hoping that it is similar to that. But I really think that these guys are going to come into this team and really make a statement for themselves right away. And Jordan Mailata had an interesting talking point in his press conference today where somebody asked him, as somebody who came from being not a starter, working their way up,
Yeah.
What was the hardest adjustment to get with the ones? And he said the speed. And hearing guys like Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith able to take one-on-ones against the ones and compete at that speed.
Gino, it sounded like Carter blew up a double team against the first team today.
And that's what you're going to see. And Jordan said that Nolan Smith hasn't been over to his side yet, but you're going to see him move over. I love that Olamide Zaccheaus has this yards after the catch ability. It seems that you have to have that as an Eagles wide receiver. As Zach Pascal, as good as he was in his role, that's really not what he was as a receiver last year. And it's evident what these guys want and what this team wants. And at the same time, the new guys are doing well. Jalen Hurts sounds like he's just continuing to be Jalen Hurts, right? And A.J. Brown continues to dominate, out-muscle Josiah Scott.
I guess the first play of the game, Jalen Hurts hits A.J. Brown on like a 30-plus yard pass. So, yeah, the veterans sound like they're killing it. But it just makes me so excited. I mean, we said it last week. We just felt like Jalen Carter was going to steal the show in camp. And I guess he blew up a double team. He beat Lane Johnson one-on-one on a rep today. Nolan Smith, apparently they're talking about that speed off the edge, and he's playing on Hassan Reddick's side of the field right now. It is very apparent how quick he is. He even Tim McManus of ESPN said after one sack, the next play he drops into coverage and blankets Dallas Goedert and Boston Scott. So that's, I mean, again, really exciting. I can't wait to see these guys on the field.
That's the true overhang position that I've mentioned on this show time and time again. Where
Smith might be better at it than Reddick when it comes like
he would.
That speed and change of direction ability. I mean, he might be more of a guy that you want dropping back in coverage than Hassan.
Hassan's a little bit bulkier than Nolan Smith, right? Yeah. Where you want him to utilize his upper body strength to get to the quarterback. Where Nolan, he's going to be more of that chess piece, and that's kind of what we have talked about. And using him as a Micah Parsons light to an extent with a little bit more coverage ability.
Micah, I'd love to see them both on the field at the same time. Like maybe take Morrow off the field, have Nolan and Reddick on one side each, and you can do whatever you want with them.
What's going to happen the first time? Like you mug Nakobe Dean up in one A gap and you mug up Nolan Smith in the other A gap. And then all of a sudden you have to account who's going to pop into coverage, who's going to rush the quarterback.
Exactly.
That's the element
there's guys
of
on both
side.
Sides. Yes, because, when it's Brandon Graham on one side and Nolan Smith on the other, it's pretty predictable. If it's Josh Sweat and Hassan Reddick, it's pretty predictable. If it's Nolan and Hassan, you have no idea.
And they're going to have all three of those guys out there. And Sean Desai doesn't shy away from allowing those smaller type of rushers, the Darrell Taylors, the Uchenna and Nwosu. I told you to go watch the guy. He just got the bag. If you want to see what guys are going to do, go watch Uchenna and what he did for Seattle last year, because the Eagles have a lot of body profiles, a lot of athletes that fit that bill of what Sean Desai is going to ask his guys. And, at the same time, you have Jordan Davis, who's 30 pounds lighter and all of a sudden is much more well-conditioned to fit this lifestyle of being a 3-down player. And it sounds like Cam Jurgens is hitting it in stride, being with the ones and everything.
Sounds like he's entrenched as the starter right now, at least early on.
Yeah, everything that you're hearing, of course, sounds positive, but you just want to see these guys getting better each and every day. And I think that the best thing that you could see from the young guys is seeing that they're able to keep up with that speed and doing well at that level. And Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith, Jalen made a comment today saying he wants to be the defensive rookie of the year, Lou.
I think he could be.
When's the last time we've had that conversation? And we did a show on that a couple weeks ago.
And again, I mean, that award goes to most of the time pass rushers, although a corner won it last year with Sauce Gardner. Most of the time it goes to players that have high sack totals. And if Jalen Carter can push close to 10 sacks as a rookie defensive tackle,
could you imagine?
Yeah, he's totally up there, man. So, yeah, it sounded like practice was exciting today for a lot of the new additions, the veterans. And I love hearing that Nick Sirianni, one whatever drill in for receivers when it comes to ball security was already screaming, fired up, 10 minutes into the practice, because he's holding them accountable, and that's big. There's going to be no lackadaisical, we were the 1 seed last year, we can get by in camp. It sounds like there's none of that, which is good, especially when there's so much rest. When the players are on the field, Sirianni knows he needs to make the most of these practices.
And that's why you're a Western New York Italian, Nick Sirianni. I don't think I got
we understand it
any happier than when I saw him breaking out a couple F-bombs and getting into those guys. And that's what you have to do, Lou. You can't
one thing he has
sit
that
quietly.
Doug and Andy Reid did not. I feel
it's
like
Western New York.
Yeah,
I opened up my
fire.
I opened up my speech at my end of the year not end of the year press conference, but our end of the year banquet with our lacrosse team. And I said, you probably don't understand why I act the way I am, and I'm an Italian from Western New York. And then people are like, "Oh, okay, that makes sense." And I'm like, "That's how I coach." Is like Nick Sirianni, man. You love the guys as much as you do because you understand what you can get out of them. And I think Nick expects the best, especially out of his position group that he has coached before. And as a head coach, you kind of flock back to that position that you knew so well, and you're going to hold them as accountable as anybody.
Right.
And set the tone with DeVonta, set the tone with AJ. Let those guys know, man, like, hey, you guys are young, doesn't matter. We know what you can do. You have to be accountable because we talked about you have to just be as good as you were last year, if not better. And if you're not better than you were, you're sitting still and you're probably going
everybody
backwards.
Else is getting better. Gino, the AFC looks a lot better this year. The NFC maybe not so much, but San Francisco's gunning for you, and you have the target on your back in that conference. So yeah, accountability is huge.
Yep.
And Gino, to wrap up the show, I want to hold the Eagles social media team accountable. They said Kelly Green jerseys are going to be announced on Monday, July 31st. The team officially announced, according to all the beat reporters, that Kelly Green merchandise, including jerseys, are going to be available at the Pro Shop at the link. So I'm nerding out on this. I can't wait. It's been so tough, but yet so fun to see all these NFL teams release these vintage uniforms. The Houston Oilers looks coming out for Tennessee, the Creamsicles, I mean, you name it. Seattle's 90s jerseys look great. We're going to finally get the Kelly Green jerseys on Monday. We've been talking about this on the show for 5 years, so I'm extremely pumped, man. I mean, they're going to look, this team especially on offense with the amount of, like, every skill position player outside of Dallas Goedert has a visor, the arm sleeves. I mean, it's going to look, this team's going to be, I can't wait. And I just wonder what games they're going to wear them.
And Jeff Kerr of CBS Sports reported that it's going to be treated as an alternate more than their base uniform.
I would imagine 2-3 games tops. However many they wore last year, where they wear black 3 times, I think they'll probably do that.
And Jeffrey Lurie has talked about kind of wanting to phase it back in. So I think that's the first step of where it maybe could eventually take over as the full-time uniform, which I wouldn't mind.
See it, but you wouldn't mind it, so you would be all interested.
I'm over these. The 2000s was like, let's make everything dull and bland.
I know.
Let's take
like
Seattle, who's so sick, and then just make it ugly, right?
I agree. I think the Kelly Green looks better than Midnight Green, but that's like our Eagles. It's what we know. They won a championship in them. I think the green has gotten better over the years. So,
but you can't tell the story without the Jawses, the Cunninghams.
I agree.
Like that's part of what got us to where we were.
But that's why I want I would love it permanently as the alternate. Like if I could pick 3 jerseys for the Eagles to permanently wear, like let's say they could never change them. For me, the home jersey is the Midnight Green. I think the away jersey, though, I think actually 2 of the 3, I just need the Midnight Green home jersey because the away jersey I'd want to be the 90s look, and I think my alternate would be the home 90s look. Even over like the 70s and the 60s designs of Kelly Green. Give me the 2 90s looks and then just the Midnight Green jersey. I could do without the white or black, but yeah, I don't know, man. I need my home jersey. That's everything.
I do like the Midnight Green. It's what won you a Super Bowl, right? I just think it's time to get with the times. It's time to get with the times.
Hey, I'm with you, though. You're right.
Everything goes backwards.
I noticed a lot of I think the 90s in all sports was the best era for uniforms. In the NBA, the NHL, the NFL, MLB always has terrible jerseys. But so when you see a lot of these get released, I'm like, these all do look better than most of these teams' normal jerseys because they're just brighter. They're more detailed. I am with you. Maybe it's more of the nostalgia in me that just doesn't want to let go of Midnight Green.
I mean, look at what the Broncos did coming out with the old school D on the white helmets.
I even like the Cleveland Browns white jerseys with the white helmets.
The all whites are
I actually like
man.
those. Yeah.
Yeah, and as much as I hate the Bills, like the best thing they could do is just go full royal blue full time, man. 90s royal blue. Those things are mint, and that like the one red that's just like a little deeper than the other red that they have there as well. And I think the Giants did a great job going back to what they got as well. And the Oilers, man, I mean, it's
going to be the best looking NFL season they've had. Since
here, Lou, here, this is a question, and this is a very niche question, and this actually hits home to me in Rochester. If a team leaves,
I'm with you on this already.
If a team leaves, and another team comes in, relocated from somewhere, should that team that is relocated there get the trophies? Should they get the lore, or is it the team that moved away?
I know if it's the same ownership, they keep everything. So like the Seattle Sonics, Clay Bennett moved them to Oklahoma City. So all the records stay. To me, I don't like that. I think it should be to the city.
I do
like
too.
The Baltimore Ravens, for instance, when they moved, like when the Cleveland Browns moved and they became Baltimore. Can you imagine if like they couldn't, Cleveland gets a new team and they can't be the Browns? Like that's what happened in Houston. I don't know if they didn't want to be the Oilers again, but they couldn't even if they wanted to because Tennessee has them. I'm with you. I hate that I love the Houston Oilers look, but I hate that Tennessee's the one that gets to wear them. Like if the Eagles moved and another team was wearing the Philadelphia Eagles jerseys, let's say in like Austin, Texas, you're damn right I got a problem with that, especially if Philly got a team back. And the funniest part, it's kind of petty, I kind of love it though a little bit, Tennessee's wearing the Houston Oilers jerseys against the Texans.
I know.
Which is hilariously petty, NBA level pettiness, but I'm with you, I am not a fan of it. I think the city owns the team, the jerseys, the records. I think it should belong to the city. I know that's not how it works, it's based on ownership, but I'm not a fan of that.
Yeah, and it hit super home to me because our NLL Rochester Nighthawks moved up to Hamilton, and all of a sudden it's like, we won our first playoff game. It's like they won 3 titles 10 years ago in my lifetime. What are you talking about? I couldn't imagine that, Lou.
Right, because if you get a new, like an expansion team back, you lose all your records.
Yeah, so the owner took them away.
Like Philly, the Eagles leave, they go to Austin, but Philly gets a team back. And you don't have a Super Bowl, actually.
No, you never won a Super Bowl. The Austin team does, exactly.
No,
and
that would bother me. That would bother me.
They have the Quebec Nordiques jerseys, and it's if a Quebec team comes back, why should the Avalanche have that jersey?
Like, you imagine as a diehard fan of a team for 30 years, and then you lose that team, and then you get one back, but you're almost not allowed to own your own history. Some other city gets to take credit for that. That's unbelievable. No way.
It's like the Buffalo
jerseys
or the
are the
chicken
last
wing
thing I
moves
care
to Pittsburgh, right?
Right. It's like we own the chicken wing now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's
We
not
bought
how
it.
this thing works.
No.
The
I'm with you,
cheesesteak
man.
all of a sudden moves to North Jersey. I think people would hate that.
I'm with you, man. I'm with you. All right, Monday, Kelly Green comes out. We'll have a show for you later on that day, continuing to recap practice. We'll take a look at those beautiful get-ups. Get to the stadium, wait in that long line, go get your jerseys. I don't know what's a cool one. I think if you need some advice, number 3, Nolan Smith, I think is cool. Number 0, DeAndre Swift.
Oh, you got to go 0.
But if you want safety long-term, number 6, DeVonta Smith would be my vote. If you're not going to get a Jalen Hurts, be different. Get somebody that's not Jalen. But for Gino Camilleri, I'm Lou DiBiase signing off. This has been the Locked On Eagles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Shout out to our everydayers. We'll be back Monday. As always, thank you for downloading. Thank you for watching and listening. And let's go Birds.
Fly, Eagles, fly.